So now that I okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and start here. Let's see if I can get this off without taking off my keypad at the same time. Shabbat Shalom. Are we live streaming? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, is there any cue that lets me know if we're on actually live streaming? Oh, there we are. Yes, okay, very good. Thank you. Shalom. We want to thank our technical person back there. I don't know who that is yet, but Albert. We want to give a shout out to Albert. Thank you so much for helping us there. Yes, give the reverse wave there. Thumbs up. Well, we want to welcome everyone here this evening, and my name is Rabbi David Barnett, as pretty much all of you know, but we have some guests here. First, we have Ivy, and what are your last names then?
We're all the Andrews family.
The Andrews family, okay. Yes.
Nice to meet everybody.
Yes, okay, yes. And share your relationship with how you got here.
Well, my older sister, Lynn, older by 5 years, by the way.
Okay.
She recommended that we come visit, and of course we wanted to have this opportunity to worship with my sister.
Oh, that is so special. And you're local in Florida as well, in the area just a little bit around Daytona Beach there, as you shared. So it's so nice to have you, and yes, it's so nice that you respect your elders. That's. Oops. Did I do that? Well, no, I was just sort of adjusting it there a little bit. So we have Ivy, and then we have their daughter, Iara. No, help me out. Ayara, yes. It's such a beautiful name. Yes, Ayara. And you're welcome. And then your dad, Kevin. Wonderful. It's so nice to have you with us here. And is there anyone else here for the first time that is visiting? Anyone else? Well, we want to welcome all of you here back. And this evening, we might have a few slight differences from the way that the service is normally done here. We're sort of doing some innovations and a few improvisations as well. But there is we have sung this before, Yedid Nefesh on page 12. And I'd like to invite everyone to turn to page 12 for Yedid Nefesh. And we'll sing more of the popular version of it. And feel free to join in. This speaks of how we're pulled by God to be God's servant and towards God's will. And your servant will run like an ayal. The ayal is the Middle Eastern antelope. Have you ever seen pictures of the Middle Eastern antelope? It's got the really long two horns that curve like that. Very graceful, very beautiful animal. And yishtachabe el mul hadaracha or hadaracha, that your servant will prostrate themselves opposite your footstool. So it's just very, very beautiful. So please join in with me. Yedid nefesh av harachaman, Yedid nefesh av harachaman, mishochav decha el retzon necha, mishochav decha. Lai, 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 el retzonecha. Yarutz avdecha, kemo ayal, ishtachave, lai, 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 el muladarecha. Yarutz avdecha, kemo ayal, ishtachave, lai, 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 el muladarecha. And there's a very beautiful reading on page 13 there, titled, We Are Not Alone. Let's read this together in unison. We are not alone, and neither our minds nor our consciences nor our creative powers can truly be understood if they are regarded as orphans without some universal parent. The whole human story, with all its tragedy and its triumph, is like a page torn from the middle of a book, without beginning or end, an undecipherable page when cut out of its context. The human context is the power greater than the human. The human adventure is part of a universal sonnet, one line in a deathless poem. Isn't that a very beautiful reading? And we continue now on page 16 with the chanting of Shalom Aleichem, welcoming the Sabbath, the Shabbat angels. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amlochim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. Boechem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlochim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu ni l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlochim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlochim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. continue now, moving into the section called the Kabbalat Shabbat service. Traditionally, we're not going to do all 7, but there are 7 psalms, one for each day of the week, leading up then to basically the Baruch Hu. But on page 22, we'll continue with Lechu Neranena. And there's a little melody there that I'm sure you're familiar with, and we'll sing that together. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena l'Adonai. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Tzur Isheinu. Naria, Naria, L'Tzur Isheinu, Nekadma Fanav Betoda. Naria, Naria, L'Tzur Isheinu, Bizmirot Naria Lo. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena l'Adonai. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena l'Adonai. And we'll take a moment here to allow you time to read some of the ensuing verses, either in Hebrew or in English or both. And then I'll continue with what they call the conclusion, the Chatima, which is like the signature in the Kabbalat Shabbat Nusach. Arbaim shana kud bedor, ve'omar amto elevavhem, vehem lo yad'u drachai, asher nishbati ve'api, im nivavon el menuchati. And on page 24, there is Psalm 96, and I don't think that we've ever done it together, the entire psalm here together yet. So let this be a first time. It's a little long, but it's a pretty melody. So I'll start us, and I'm sure that some of you have heard the melody. Please join in, and if the words are a little difficult, just sort of hum along. Shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai, baruch shemo basru miyom liyom yeshuato, sapru v'goyim kevodo bechol amim niflotav, ki gadol Adonai u'melal me'od, norahu al kol Elohim dai dai dai, ki kol Elohei amim elilim, v'Adonai shamayim asa, hod v'hadar lefanav, oz v'tiferet b'mikdasho, havu l'Adonai mishpachot amim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kevod shemo, seu mincha uvo lechatzrotav dai dai dai, ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh, chilu mipanav kol haaretz, imru v'goyim Adonai malach avtikon tevel bal timot yadai dai dai yadin amim b'meisharim, yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz, yir'am hayam umlo, יעלו שדי וכל אשר בו, אז ירננו כל עצי יער לפני אדוני, כי בא לשפוט הארץ, ישפוט תבל בצדק ועמים באמונתו. And we'll continue moving ahead a few pages here. Please turn to page 30 with a melody that you're a little bit more familiar with, and that's Romamu at the bottom of page 30, actually, the bottom of page 30. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. And we continue now on page 38 with the chanting of L'Chadodi. And we'll do the first two stanzas and then the last two stanzas. And at the very last one, Bo'ī v'Shalom, we will rise, and having had our compass orientation last week, or 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Yes. East is this way. So we're confident on that. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. Yishme'anu elam yuchad. Adonai echad. Ushmo echad, v'shem ultiferet v'litila, lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor habracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. And then on page 40, the next to the last stanza, ימין ושמאל תברוצי, ואת אדוני תריצי, על יד איש בן פרצי, ונשמחה ונגילה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Now we'll invite you to rise as we face then eastward with Bo'ī v'Shalom. Bo'ī v'Shalom עטרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. And just before you sit, is there anyone here who is coming back from a house of Shiva who had lost someone during the last week? I hope not. Okay, please go ahead and be seated then. So to conclude the Kabbalat Shabbat section here, Let's read responsively on page 43 for the Sabbath psalm, Psalm 92. It is good to thank you, O Lord, to sing praises to your exalted name. To the sound of the 10-string lyre, with voice and the music of the harp. How great are your deeds, O Lord, how profound are your designs. Though the wicked may thrive like grass, and doers of evil seem to flourish, those who oppose you will perish, the workers of iniquity will be routed. I see the defeat of my foes, I hear the doom of my enemies. Planted in the house of the Lord, they will flourish in the courts of our God. Proclaiming that the Lord is just, my rock, in whom there is no unrighteousness. And here's a melody that's an oldie, but I'm sure many of you know it, an oldie but goodie. Tzadikat amar yifarach, keres balvanon yiskei shetolim beveit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafarichu od yenovon beseva t'shenim v'rananim yiyu lahagid ki yashar Adonai tzori tzori velo avalata bo. And the word Baruch Hu, just for your edification here and knowledge, the word Baruch Hu has a root in it, berech, meaning knee. And so the idea that bowing and the knee bowing is really the origin of the word Baruch Hu. So on page 50, we'll invite you to participate in Jewish Aerobics 101. Please rise. Thank you. Yeah. And we face eastward. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vaed. Amen. Please be seated. We continue with the reading at the bottom of page 51 responsively. O Lord, your word brings on the evening twilight. The heavens proclaim your glory. Help us to recognize your guiding power in distant galaxies and in our own souls. Source of peace, bless our worship. May our meditations find favor in your sight. So that, like the changing seasons, the days, the nights, our lives too will proclaim your glory. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzvaot, shemo elechai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Amari v'aravi. Amen. And on page 52, there's a little melody for Kihem Chayenu, part of a longer melody, but the part that I'm thinking of is jumping out at me right at the moment. So please join in.
כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה.
I didn't know if that was a thumb clapping or... Oh, okay.
ועבדך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. Amen. We continue now with the Shema, page 54. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
And we continue with the remaining paragraphs of the Shema, individually continuing on page 56 through 58. And on page 58, I'm going to come in with the concluding phrase, Lema'an tizkeru, 4 lines from the bottom. Lema'an tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'item kedushim le'elohechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzaiti etchem eretz Mitzrayim, leot lachem le'elohim, ani Adonai Elohechem. Adonai Elohechem emet. And we continue now on page 61, reading responsibly through the middle of the page, where we will revert back to the Hebrew with the phrase Umalchuto b'ratzon. True and certain it is that there is one God, incomparable, and that we, the household of Israel, are God's people. Great are the things which God has done, with wonders which are without number. May God continue to protect our people and guard all humankind from disaster. They accepted God's sovereignty willingly and sang in joyous thanksgiving. And now we'll continue in the Hebrew. Umalchuto b'ratzon kiblu aleihem Moshe b'nei Yisrael lechanu shira b'simcha rabah ve'amru chulam mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh norat hilot osef ele malchutecha reuvenecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe Zeli anu ve'amru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed ve'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miyad hazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai baruch hu uvaruch shemo gal Yisrael.
Please join me in singing Amen. Amen. Now, the Hashkivenu is a very beautiful prayer, and it really is a prayer asking for God's protection over us as we lie down at night. There are different translations and creative adaptations of that here. I think the one that's grabbing me at the moment is the one that is on page 62, to lie down in peace. So let's recite this in English responsively by stanza. Help us, O God, to lie down in peace and protect us with your love as we sleep. May we rest secure and untroubled and arise with confidence to the challenges of a new day. Thank you. And by the way, you know, that phrase, guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps, lo yanum velo yishan, is the phrase in Hebrew. It sort of has a nice ring to it. Lo yanum velo yishan. And I think there are some songs that have been placed to that phrase as well. But I'm going to continue now with the concluding phrase of that on page 62. 2 lines from the bottom, Ufros Aleinu. Ufros Aleinu sukat shalomecha, baruch atah Adonai, hapurei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Amen. And on page 64, we have the Vishamru. And there are various congregational traditions here. Many stand for this. Do you stand for the Vishamru? Yes, we've done that. Okay, very good. So I'll invite you to engage in Jewish Aerobics Part 2, page 64, for Rising for the Vishamru. And we'll just do a simple melody here that I think I shared with you once. I'd love you all to learn. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי Vayom Ashvi Shabbat Vayinafash. Page 66. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah Be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon v'yomechon U'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael Bagala, Bagala, Uvisman Karif, Vimeru, Amen. Yehesh me Rabba me Vorach, Leolam Olome Olmaya. Yitbarach, Vishtabach, Vitbar, Vidruma, Vitnase, Vitadar, Vitale, Vitalal, Shemed Kudesha, Rihu. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ויאמרו Amen. And we continue now with the silent individual prayer, the Ma'ariv Amidah for Shabbat. The traditional version is found on page 68, and if you want to include the Imahot, the matriarchs, please continue on page 69. I heard Mark even giving us our key for Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Third part, ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. And on page 80, since we're on a good roll here, let's continue with the Vayachulu. And we'll invite you to rise for this if you are inclined. And we'll continue through the slight repetition here through page 82. Vaychulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam vaychal Elohim bayom hashvi melachto asher asa vayishbot bayom hashvi mikol melachto asher asa vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvi vayekadesh oto Kivo shavat mikol melachto, kivo shavat mikol melachto, asher bara, asher bara, asher bara, Elohim la asot. Page 82. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, קונה שמיים וארץ, מגן אבות בדברו, מחיי מתים במאמרו, האל הקדוש שאין כמוהו, המניח לעמו ביום שבת קודשו, כי בם רצה להניח להם, כי בם רצה להניח להם, לפניו נעבוד ביראה ופחד, ונודה לשמו בכל יום תמיד, מעין הברכות אל ההודעות אדון השלום, מקדש השבת ובורך שביעי, ומניח בקדושה לעמדו שני עונג, זכר למעשה בראשית. Page 84. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, רצה מנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך, שבענו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך. וטהר, וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת, והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו, יבואו ברצון שבת קודשך, ויאנוחו בישראל מקדשי שמך. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. We continue page 86 with the Reader's Kaddish. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועלמא דברי חירותי וימליך מלכותי, וחייכונו ויומכונו וחי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולם מעלמיה, יתברך, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ולמה ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשא. לעלה מן כל ברכתה ושכתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן, אמן. תתקבל סלותכון וברכון לכל ישראל קדם אבהון דבשמיא ואמרו אמן, אמן. יהי שלום הרבים שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן, אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן, amen. Please be seated. And while we're sort of on a roll with things here, I'm going to invite you to turn to the back portion of the back cover of your Sidurim. And we will have a Mishavera, a blessing for those who are ill, with the Debbie Friedman melody here. And of course, I know you all know it well, so join in. You usually do this on Friday nights as well, yes? Yeah. Mi sheberach avoteinu mekor habracha limoteinu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. And we pray for healing for those in our congregational midst who are ill, including Henry Birch, Bruce Burpee, Emilia Cooley, Gordon Feinberg, Donald Ingram, Rita Kindle, Steve Lifshin, Dome Salfi, Loretta Scher, Izzy Sigmund, Saul Stein, Bill Thompson, Peter Teitelbaum, Nancy Town, Herb Weissman, Label Ben Margolit, Liebe Shlomit Rachel Bat Margolit, Feibel Shlomo Ben Devorah, Israel Ben Ethel, Avram Ben Benjamin, and Gila Yafa Bat Bela. And we'll ask if there are others. What we'll do is this evening, I will start on this side, and we'll go forward to backwards this time. Sheila, yes.
Audrey Dash, Bruce Dash, Estelle Vladimirsky, and Teresa Cowell.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Let's continue moving backwards in that. Okay, I think you're up next, Lynn.
Drew Wartenberg, Oliver Pridemore, and Barbara Gable.
Okay, tremendous. Any others on this side? Going once, going twice. Okay, let's start in the front here.
Aviva Esther.
Aviva Esther. Yes, okay. Yes. I think, yeah. Yes, please. Thank you. Any others? Yes.
Katerina Williams.
Okay.
Katerina.
Yeah, which is me.
Okay, good. Any others?
Love you, Sheila.
Okay, let's continue then with the second stanza.
מי שברך אמותינו, מקור הברכה לאבותינו. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Great. Wonderful. Well, this evening, I'd like to share with you some teaching from our sacred literature. Now, in my upcoming bulletin article, which actually I think was sent to you already, I made a reference to this section of the Mishnah, a statement by Rabbi Tarfon. And I would like to sort of fill that in a little bit with you this evening, because it's really it's one of my favorite. It's one of my all-time favorite portions of the Mishnah. And it's just a beautiful teaching and has so many lessons in it for us, even though the actual Mishnah that we're going to study is actually quite short. And so first, what I'd like to do is just give a little bit of a background here on the text of the Mishnah itself, on the historical background and origins of the text, because if we don't know where something comes from, it's hard to place it in context, much as we were learning from our reading earlier on context. So the earliest strands of rabbinic teaching following the codification of the Bible, the Tanakh, were known as braitot. Braitot, that was the term. They were little strands of teachings passed down from teacher to student orally. This was the beginning of the true oral tradition. So we have really two Torahs traditionally in rabbinic thought. We have, and I'm going to give you the Hebrew terms first and translate them into English, because I'd like you to hear them. Torah, Sheba'al, Torah, you know, Sheba'al means from. So Torah, Sheba'al Peh, okay, the oral Torah. Actually, the first one is Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah, the 10 Commandments, starting with that. And later on, expanding that to the Torah, certainly, on the first level. So the written Torah, and then the oral Torah. Torah Shebichtav, Bichtav, Kotevet is to write, and then Peh is mouth. So the oral Torah. So the oral Torah, there was a prohibition against writing it down. You were not supposed to write it down. And so many, many teachings were passed down from teacher to student. And there were many individuals, many famous rabbis, who had a specialty. They could memorize large amounts of teachings, especially if you memorize something when you're young. They are finding this out now. When you start very, very young, memorizing things, that's the age of like 3 to 7, 3 to 8, 9 is prime for memorization, right? Try remembering the preamble to the Constitution now as an adult if you haven't remembered it earlier, right? It's pretty tough, right? Where if you do it as a kid, you know, and the Gettysburg Address. How many ever learned the Gettysburg Address as a child, as a young person, right? And you remember a lot of it, right? 7 years ago, etc. And so I won't go too far because you'll find my point of where I will have a forgetful moment there. And I'm afraid it might even go beyond a senior moment to be a little light about the situation. But nonetheless, in these early experiences of these very educated rabbis, and really even through the modern period, you know, they would learn
they would memorize text, and by the time they were 6, they would know a tremendous amount. Like maybe an entire section of the Mishnah or Gemara by heart, just because they could memorize at that age easier. So as an adult, we might not be able to memorize as much, but we have some other, compensations that come along. But those rabbis who were able to memorize a lot and repeat them were called, in the Aramaic, they were called repeaters. And the Aramaic term for that was Tanaim. Tanaim. So those are the earliest rabbis of the Talmud, of the Mishnah. Now the Mishnah itself is written in Hebrew. The commentary to the Mishnah, the Gemara, is written in the language of the Kaddish, Aramaic. And the time frame for the composition of the Mishnah was roughly a 400-year period. 200 before the Common Era till 200 after. And it's very interesting that this 400-year period in human history seems to have been very, very significant. Greek philosophy was certainly in its development and its ascendancy during that time. Also Chinese philosophy. Now, the Chinese philosophy actually predated a little bit. You had the Confucian era a little earlier than that, but 200 to 400, that was the time of the Han Dynasty in China. And there was a tremendous amount of structure and literature development there, as well as governmental development. And so it seemed to be a magic period, this 400-year period in human development. And we know that there were cross-cultural interplays and interactions. The Silk Route, going to China and the Far East, went through Israel. And it is not without coincidence, I would say. It is not coincidental that there are 4 lines exactly, word for word, that you find in Pirkei Avot, in the Mishnah, that you also find in the Analects of Confucius. In the same order, with the same words. It's quite astounding. I think I'm going to make a point of sharing that particular Mishnah with you at a different time, because that's a teaching in itself. But in my article, now having given this background on the Mishnah itself, a little bit of historical background. By the way, the combination of the Mishnah, again in Hebrew, and the commentary in Aramaic, the Gemara, which was the record of the discussions that they had roughly between the years 200 and 700, going into 800 and 900, in the circles, in the yeshivas, basically, the circles of study, the houses of study, both in primarily Babylonia, but because remember in 536, the Second Temple was destroyed, the Jews were exiled to Babylonia. Then they came back to Israel in 536 when the Babylonians were conquered by the Persians. And I call him Uncle Cyrus, so you can remember, like, if I ever teach it to kids, I say, Uncle Cyrus. They think, oh, my Uncle Cyrus, right? It's an easy to remember it. Uncle Cyrus was good to the Jews, the Persian new leader, and allowed the Jews to come back and restore the temple. However, there were some famous academies that remained in Babylonia, namely those called, one was called Sura, and another one has a really funny sounding name, but once you hear it, it sort of sticks with you. Pumbedita is called, Pumbedita. So Sura and Pumbedita were very established academies of learning, and they discussed their texts in the they read the Mishnah, and of course the prayers in Hebrew, and then discussed those texts, the passages of the Mishnah. They discussed them in the language that they spoke at that time in that area, which was Aramaic. And you can still find some Aramaic speakers extant in the world today. There are still some people who speak Aramaic in certain areas of Syria, northern Syria, certain areas of Iraq, and in Temecula, California. There is a man in the downtown area of Temecula, California. There's a man who has a window decal business. He does shading for like cars and things. How you put that dark green and stuff. He speaks Aramaic with his family. I met him once, and He spoke some Aramaic to me. I spoke the Kaddish to him, and he understood it. And he said one of his prayers to me. It was quite interesting. But that having been said, the text of the Mishnah is a special kind of Hebrew. It's Mishnaic Hebrew. It's a style of its own. So, in Mishnah 20, Rabbi Tarfon teaches, and I reference these 3 lines as the conditions, the limitations, and the excuses on human accomplishment and accomplishments. It's so short, I'll read it both in Hebrew and English. Hayom katzar, the day is short. Ve'amalacha merubah, so the work is great, it's immense. The workers are indolent, they're really lazy. Atzelim, hapoalim atzelim, ve'aschar habe, and the reward bountiful, plentiful. Ubal habayit dochek, and the master of the house is pressing. So now let's have a little interactive part here. Hayom katzar. How many of us getting older? We're all getting older, but how many of us who are like over 20, right, have come to realize that as time goes on, as we become older, it seems to accelerate in velocity. Has anyone noticed that? Right? It goes faster every day. And then how many of you have had the experience, and I'm intensely, this has hit me during this last year. How many of you have had the experience of looking back in time, and whereas individual moments might seem to drag this, that, or the other, but you look back and you look at a period of years, right? Months, weeks, years, decades, 10, 20 years, they can seem to vanish. You look back and you say, where did it go? It's amazing, that experience, and it really, it helps to, I think, hone us and humble us, and also teach us that life can be shorter than we may envision, and that however long or short it is, compared to God's time, it's minuscule, it's nothing. And we say that in our liturgy. And certainly a day, depending what you do with your day, it can fly by. It can fly by, especially if you give yourself activities to do. We want to do a mitzvah of taking care of the body, so shmirat haguf, so if you do exercise and then you eat properly, and fixing that, it takes time. And pretty soon, where's the day gone? And what have we done with our time? So, Hayom Katzar, it's a limitation. It's a limitation for every human being on earth. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. What is our main mission? In 2 words. Well, let's say, it's found in the Aleinu prayer. If you were to say, what is your mission statement? If someone would say, come to you and say, please tell me, I'm not Jewish, I don't know much about our Jewish tradition, if they are Jewish, or especially non-Jews, what's your mission statement? What's the mission statement of us as the Jewish people? Pardon me? To enlighten life. That's good. Very good. It even goes beyond that. It goes beyond that because the enlightenment can be in your head. It can stay there. So what would be going beyond that? There's a specific phrase that I'm looking for that's found in the Aleinu prayer. Specific phrase. Going once. Going twice. That's correct. Give us the 4 words, Mark. Litaken olam. Lynn, do you know it? What? That's correct. In what? It's more, tikkun olam is the repair of the world. But the forward phrase has something else. Litaken olam b'malchut Shaddai. Now, Shaddai is an ancient term for God, right? El Shaddai, right? An ancient term for God. One of the oldest, right? It's even put on the mezuzot and everything, okay? So, to repair the world in the kingdom of the Almighty. Now, what does that mean? Can take a whole separate sermon to discover that itself, but bottom line, let's just make a suggestion that what we're talking about is bringing God's kingdom, bringing the ideal state of a heavenly sphere to the earth, right? And that's our mission as Jews. And that's where they come. Litaken is a verb form, an intensive, technically it's what they call the PL form. It's an intensive form, and the noun construct from it is tikkun. So the repair of the world, as you said, Lynn, is correct. And as you also said there, Mark. So the day is short. The task is great. The workers now indolent. Hapolim atzilim. Is there anyone here who could tell me that they have perfect discipline? All right. Yes. Even the most disciplined of people can find a lazy streak within themselves. You know, there have been times when I would focus on a project. I'm thinking of one time when I was much younger. There was one day that I had decided to play a guitar concerto, and the level of this particular concerto, the Concierto de Aranjuez, was far beyond my technical skill at that moment. But I decided I was going to do it. But I'd never studied how to really do the scales, and there was a passage that had to be a scale done perfectly. So I worked on that one measure for 12 hours one day. Now, most professional musicians will practice maybe 4 hours a day, but they do it consistently over a lifetime. But here I was. I decided to do that, and I did it 12 hours one day, and then I kept it up for several months, and I played the concerto. But could by any stretch of the imagination, I certainly would never claim to have perfect discipline. But it's a skill that we can draw on and that we can also improve on ourselves with. So there's this element of laziness within each of us. Now, the reward here, what is this reward about? What is that concept? The reward is plentiful. What are we talking about? What does that mean? What kind of reward? Monetary reward? Some are offering, like, they find a fugitive and they offer, $1 million. What kind of reward are we talking about? Yes.
Inner peace?
What?
Could it be inner peace?
Very nice. Inner peace. Yes. What else?
Inner satisfaction.
Inner satisfaction. What else? Inner peace, inner satisfaction. Very good. Certainly collecting mitzvah points for doing good things, right? Right? And the reward is not necessarily, when we think of reward, sometimes we think selfishly. Here's another insight into this that I want to share with you that's coming to me. And that is, the reward may not be for us. The reward may be the result of our actions that we do that benefits someone else. How about that? There are many different levels of rewards. So it's very, very, very interesting that way.
Speaking of discipline, I was very well disciplined growing up. I used to wake up 4 in the morning to go swim practice every day.
Good for you.
But in the summertime, and I swam, and I had to beat my intervals. The swimming was so military.
Did you learn how to do flip turns?
Oh yeah, I was a butterfly.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's a hard stroke. That's a different story. We'll talk about the butterfly at a different time there. That's a different thing entirely. But going back to our Mishnah, Ubal Habayit Dochek, and the master is urgent. Who's the master? What are we talking about here? Who's the master? God. That's right. God is the Baal Habayit. He's the master of the house. He's the master of the world. How many saw Les Miserables? The play Les Miserables. Remember the song, The Master of the House? Dum, 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 dum. Right? That's a fun. He was the master of the hotel. Well, this is the world hotel. This is God, right? Melech Malchei HaMelechim, the king of all kings, right? So given those limitations, the day is short. The work is great. The workers are lazy. The reward is great, and the master is urgent. What do? Do we give up in despair? The limitations are so immense. They're startling. They're overwhelming. They can lead to despair if you feel you have to. It could lead to being totally overwhelmed. And, think of a situation where massive stimuli is coming in. You get paralyzed, right? And analysis to paralysis, right? So, what is Rabbi Tarfon's wisdom that I quoted in the article, the solution? Lo alecha malacha ligmor. You don't have to finish the work. That's not your responsibility. We don't have to be individually responsible for completely fixing everything that's wrong in the world. We can't. It's too much to expect of ourselves. However, velo ata ben chorin lihibatel mimenu. But neither are we free people. Ben chorin is someone who's, in this sense, it means a free individual, but it really is talking about the concept really more of license, right? To abdicate responsibility, right? We're not in positions where we can abdicate our responsibility totally, and avoid it, right? To cancel it out. That's one thing that can't be canceled, right? The mission to fulfill, God's commandments and our mission to repair the world, to make things better. That can never be canceled out. There's no cancel culture that could ever cancel that out, nor should there be, right? Because it's a source that comes beyond ourselves. And that's what we posit as the basis. In comparison with some modern secular ideologies, they don't have that ultimate source, and hence they cannot have that ultimate moral imperative. There's a different message in that at greater length at a different time. But right now, in this context, Rabbi Tarfon's advice is very, very wise, and God willing, we should be able to incorporate it into our lives. Amen. And now, we have a great, speaking of mitzvot. So Deborah Marks, you go, why, Debbie or Deborah? What is it? I'm getting confused. Deborah.
No, Debbie.
Debbie, okay. Well, at least I had the basic name right. Dvorah in Hebrew, right? Dvorah, yes. So Debbie has done a big mitzvah for us. She has provided cups for those who would like them to be able to engage in the Kiddush. And so I think I found the Kiddush when I was back on the page here. Who remembers the page here?
90. Page 90.
Page 90, thank you.
So the cups are all spread out.
So the cups are done in a very artistic way here. They're spread out, and all I need, first of all, where are they?
They're just spread out in the back, so if everyone wants to go get
Okay, let's give everyone permission to rise and to get a cup. I'm going to go back and get a cup for myself. I can assure you that this it's grape juice. If someone wants, we can have wine here at a later time too, but it's grape juice and it's kosher.
Rabbi, why do we call God Yahweh Babylonian? Because God's called Adonai, right?
That's one. Some people don't even say that. Yes.
But
Just a second.
the name,
Welcome back. How you folks? How
Okay, folks, are we ready? So I want to thank Debbie for doing this for us there. And spreading them socially distantly and all that. On page 90, we have the Kiddush. And we'll invite you please now to rise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'ratza banu b'shabbat kodsho b'yahava u'v'ratzon inchilanu Zikaron למעשה בראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר לציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. אמן. לחיים טובים ולשלום. Thank you, Manischewitz. At this time, I was looking for the Reader's Kaddish here. Actually, we did that before. I think we can go directly into Aleinu, page 118. Page 118. And we'll invite you to rise, and we're going to face east here. And I want to point out to you the line that we talked about. It's on page 20. On page 20, the second paragraph of the Aleinu, our mission statement. It's page 20, second line, beginning with the last word. Tetaken olam b'malchut Shaddai. Just so you know about that. Page 118 now, the beginning of Aleinu. We'll just do the first paragraph. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gdula liotzer b'reishit, shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, משתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלוכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. שכינת זו בגבי מרומים הוא אלוהינו את מלכנו אפסולתו ככתוב בתורתו ודעת היום וישבות אל לבביך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד על כן נגדך אדוני אלוהינו לירום ותקן העולם במלכות שדי וקודש. כי המלכות שלך היא רמיה תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני מלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Please be seated. And at this time I would like to share with you the list of the names of those for whom we commemorate and remember a Yortzeit. I will read the list that I have and the names that I have, and then ask if there are any others from amongst you that we should add. Bertha Bresnik, mother of Simi Golub and grandmother of Dara Miniard. Herman Rubinger, father of Harriet Gare. Chester Irwin Howard, father of Lynn Howard and of Ivy, respectively. Correct? Am I correct on that? Yes. Okay. Sam Stein, uncle of Simi Golub. Barbara Gare, daughter of Harriet Gare. And David Zelkowitz, brother-in-law of Debbie Zelkowitz. Are there any other names that we should add then for Yortzeit for this week? Okay, in light of that, for those who are reciting Kaddish, I'll invite you to please rise and join me, page 124 for the Mourner's Kaddish. And I slow this down so that everyone can say it. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Ve'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'yimru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lemei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpo'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran ve'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May God grant comfort to all of us who mourn, and may the memory of those for whom we mourn remain among us as a loving, living, and inspiring benediction. And we can say, Amen. And now it's my honor and pleasure to call upon Dan Williams, our congregational co-president.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for leading services and being with us this weekend. We appreciate it. Where's Marcia? Marcia? Thank you. Where are you? Thank you for showing up and helping us set up earlier. Okay? All right. A few announcements. We have some upcoming events. On Saturday, August 14th, we're going to be having a musical Havdalah at the home of Lisa and Eric Alpert. Details to be announced later on. Sunday, August 15th, we're going to be having a family picnic sponsored by the CBA Men's Club. Congregants and members of the community are welcome. Details to be announced. And then finally, on Sunday, August 22nd, it's going to be CBA Mimosas and the Mitzvah Brigade meeting. Congregants and community members are welcome as well. And that will be at the home of Lois Smith. Lois, where are you? There you are. Okay. Thank you, Lois. With that, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Thank you, Nat. And we have the High Holy Days coming up. And for the tune of Yigdal, for the Psalm of Yigdal, which is based on the 13 principles of ascribed to God, as characterized by Maimonides. There's a Sephardic melody that goes with this. And I'm going to suggest we'll just sort of let you hear it. Some of you may have heard it before. Some of you may never have heard it. We're not going to do the whole Yigdal, but just a few stanzas, the first stanza and then probably the last one there. But I want to sing it to the Sephardic melody and invite you to join in. Yigdal Elohim chai ve'yishtabach Imtza ve'ein et metziuto Echad ve'ein sheni. Rega. Yes, that. Echad ve'ein yachid ke'ichudo ne'lam ve'gam ein sof le'achduto. Let's do one more verse. Ein lo demut haguf ve'eino guf lo naroch elav kedushato kadmon lechol davar asher nivra rishon ve'in rishit lereshito yishlach leketz yamin meshichenu לפתות מחקקת ישועתו מתים יחייל ברוב חסדו ברוך הדיד שם תהילתו. Shabbat Shalom.